There," she added as they stood in the companionway. "Now don't you feel as though we were facing an adventure? We shan't be able to see a yard ahead of us, and the wind is singing." They passed through up the companionway. She took his arm and he suddenly felt the touch of her warm fingers feeling for his other hand. He gripped them tightly, and his last impression of her face, before they plunged into darkness, was of a queer softness, as though she were giving herself up to some unexpected but welcome emotion. Her eyes were half closed. She had the air of one wrapped in silence. So they walked almost the whole length of the deck. Philip, indeed, had no impulse or desire for speech. All his aching nerves were soothed into repose. The last remnants of his ghostly fears had been swept away. They were on the windward side of the ship, untenanted, save now and then by the shadowy forms of other promenaders. The whole experience, even the regular throbbing of the engines, the swish of the sea, the rising and falling of a lantern bound to the top of a fishing smack by which they were passing, the distant chant of the changing watch, all the night sighs and sounds of the sea-borne hostel, were unfamiliar and exhilarating. And inside his hand, even though given him of her great pity, a woman's fingers lay in his. She spoke at last, a little abruptly. "There is something I must know about," she said. "You have only to ask," he assured her. "Don't be afraid," she continued. "I wish to ask you nothing which might give you pain. But I must know. You see, I am really such an ordinary woman. I must know about someone whom you went to visit that day, didn't you, at Detton Magna?" He answered her almost eagerly. "I want to talk about Beatrice," he declared. "I want to tell you everything about her. I know that you will understand. We were brought up together in the same country place. We were both thrown upon the world about the same time. That was one thing, I suppose, which made us kindly disposed towards one another. We corresponded always. I commenced my unsuccessful fight in London. I lived, I can't tell you how, week by week, month by month. I ate coarse food. I was a hanger on to the fringe of everything in life which appealed to me. Fed intellectually on the crumbs of free libraries and picture galleries. I met no one of my own station. I was at a public school and my people were gentlefolk, or tastes. I had no friends in London before whom I dared present myself, no money to join a club where I might have mixed with my fellows, no one to talk to or exchange a single idea with. And I wasn't always the gloomy sort of person I have become. In my younger days I loved companionship, and the women, my landlady's daughter with dyed hair, a loud voice, slatternly in the morning, a flagrant imitation of her less honest sisters at night. Who else? Where was I to meet women when I didn't even know men? I spent my poor holidays at Detton Magna. Our very loneliness brought Beatrice and me closer together. We used to walk in those ugly fields around Detton Magna and exchange the story of our woes. She was a teacher at the National School. The children weren't pleasant. Their parents were worse. The drudgery was horrible, and there wasn't any escape for her. Sometimes she would sob as we sat side by side. She, too, wanted something out of life, as I did, and there seemed nothing but that black wall always before us. I think that we clung together because we shared a common misery. We talked endlessly of a way out. For me, what was there? There was no one to rob. I wasn't clever enough. There was no way I could earn money, honestly or dishonestly. And for her, buried in that Derbyshire village amongst the collieries, where there was scarcely a person who hadn't the taint of the place upon them, what chance was there for her? There was nothing she could do either. I knew in my heart that we were both ready for evil things, if by evil things we could make our escape. And we couldn't. So we tried to lose ourselves in the only fields left for such as we. We read poetry. We tried to live in that unnatural world where the brains only are nourished and the body languishes. It was a morbid, unhealthy existence. But I plodded along and so did she. Then her weekly letters became different. For the first time she wrote me with reserves. I took a day's vacation and I went down to Detton Magna to see what had happened. "That was the day," she interrupted softly, "when—" "That was the day," he assented. "I remember so well getting out of the train and walking up that long, miserable street. School wasn't over, and I went straight to her cottage as I have often done before. There was a change. Her cheap furniture had gone. It was like one of those little rooms we had dreamed of. There was a soft carpet upon the floor, Chippendale furniture, flowers, hothouse fruit, and on the mantelpiece the photograph of a man." He paused, and they took the whole one long turn along the windswept, shadowy deck in silence. "Presently she came," he continued. "The change was there too. She was dressed simply enough, but even I, in my inexperience, knew the difference. She came in, she who had spoken of suicide a short time ago, singing softly to herself. She saw me, our eyes met, and the story was told. I knew, and she knew that I knew." It seemed as though something in his tone might have grated upon her. Gently, but with a certain firmness, she drew her hand away from his. "You were very angry, I suppose," she murmured. Some instinct told him exactly what was passing in her thoughts. In a moment he was on the defensive. "I think," he said, "that if it had been any other man— But listen. The photograph which I took from the mantelpiece and threw into the fire was the photograph of my own cousin. His father and my father were brought up together. My father chose the church. His founded the factory in which most of the people in Detton Magna were employed. When my grandfather died, it was found that he was penniless. The whole of his money had gone towards founding the Douglas Romilly Shoe Company. I won't weary the details. The business prospered, but we remained in poverty. When my mother died, I was left with nothing. My uncle made promises and never kept them. He too died. My cousin and I quarreled. He and his father both held that the money advanced by my grandfather had been a gift and not a loan. They offered me a pittance. Well, I refused anything. I spoke plain words, and that was an end of it. And then I came back and I saw his picture, my cousin's picture, upon the mantelpiece. I can see it now, and it looks hateful to me. All the old fires burned up in me. I remembered my father's death, a pauper he was. I remembered how near I had been to starvation. I remembered the years I had spent in a garret whilst Douglas had idled time away at Oxford, had left there to trifle with the business his father had founded, had his West End club, hunters and shooting. It was a vicious, mad, jealous hatred, perhaps, but I claim that it was human. I went out of that little house, and it seemed to me that there was a new lust in my heart, a new craving desire. If I had thrown myself into that canal, they might well have called it temporary insanity. I didn't, but I was mad all the same. Anything else I did was temporary insanity." Her hand suddenly came back again, and she leaned towards him through the darkness. "You poor child," she whispered. "Stop there, please. Don't be afraid to think you've told me this." You see, I am of the world, and I know that we are all only human. Now,